Question 1. Stakeholder feedback indicates that Jinko Solar has recently experienced a minor, but potentially reportable, environmental incident at one of its manufacturing facilities. While the immediate impact appears contained, there is concern within management about the potential negative perception and its effect on investor confidence if the incident is widely publicized. The company is considering how to communicate this event. Option A. Immediately report the environmental incident to the relevant regulatory authorities and issue a public statement detailing the nature of the incident, the steps taken to mitigate it, and any potential long-term implications, in accordance with disclosure requirements. Option B. Issue a brief, vague statement to the public acknowledging a minor operational adjustment without specifying the environmental nature of the incident or reporting it to regulatory bodies. Option C. Provide a public statement that focuses solely on the company's commitment to environmental sustainability, omitting any specific details about the recent incident. Option D. Only inform key internal stakeholders about the incident and instruct them to refrain from discussing it externally until further notice. Correct answer is A. Immediately report the environmental incident to the relevant regulatory authorities and issue a public statement detailing the nature of the incident, the steps taken to mitigate it, and any potential long-term implications, in accordance with disclosure requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to maintain a positive public image and the ethical obligation to disclose material information accurately and transparently. Jinko Solar, as a publicly traded entity, operates under strict regulatory oversight that mandates disclosure of significant events that could impact investor decisions. The pressure to downplay negative news, even if not outright false, can lead to misleading stakeholders and potentially violate regulatory requirements designed to protect investors. Careful judgment is required to balance business interests with legal and ethical duties. The correct approach involves transparent and timely disclosure of the environmental incident to relevant regulatory bodies and the public, as required by applicable regulations. This aligns with the principles of corporate governance and investor protection, ensuring that stakeholders have accurate information to make informed decisions. Specifically, this would involve adhering to the reporting timelines and content requirements stipulated by the relevant securities regulators and environmental protection agencies. An incorrect approach that involves withholding or significantly downplaying the severity of the environmental incident would be a failure to comply with disclosure obligations. This could lead to accusations of market manipulation or misleading investors, resulting in significant fines, reputational damage, and potential legal action. Another incorrect approach, which is to only disclose the information internally without external reporting, would also be a failure to meet regulatory requirements for public companies and could be seen as an attempt to conceal material information. Finally, an approach that involves providing incomplete or selectively disclosed information, while technically not false, can still be considered misleading and a breach of ethical duties, as it fails to provide a complete picture to stakeholders. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. This involves understanding the specific disclosure obligations under the relevant jurisdiction's laws and regulations, assessing the materiality of the information, and acting with integrity and transparency. When faced with conflicting pressures, seeking legal and compliance advice is crucial to ensure adherence to all applicable rules and ethical standards. Question 2. Operational review demonstrates that a new marketing campaign for Jinko Solar's latest solar panel technology is utilizing customer data that may not have explicit consent for this specific marketing purpose, raising potential data privacy concerns. A team member suggests proceeding with the campaign to meet aggressive sales targets, with a plan to address data consent issues retrospectively. Option A. Attempt to resolve the data consent issue independently by making minor adjustments to the data before launching the campaign. Option B. Immediately halt the marketing campaign and escalate the data usage to the Jinko Solar Compliance Department for a thorough review before any further action is taken. Option C. Proceed with the marketing campaign as planned to meet sales targets and make a note to update data consent records at a later date. Option D. Dismiss the data privacy concern as a minor technicality, assuming the data is not highly sensitive, and continue with the campaign. The correct answer is B. Immediately halt the marketing campaign and escalate the data usage to the Jinko Solar Compliance Department for a thorough review before any further action is taken. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a potential conflict between achieving business objectives and upholding ethical standards, particularly concerning data privacy and compliance. The pressure to meet targets can tempt individuals to overlook or downplay regulatory requirements, making careful judgment and adherence to established guidelines paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the issue to the compliance department and halting any further data processing until a thorough review can be conducted. This is the right professional practice because it prioritizes regulatory adherence and data protection above immediate business gains. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, which are fundamental to data privacy regulations. By involving the compliance department, the company ensures that any data handling is reviewed against relevant laws and internal policies, preventing potential breaches and associated penalties. This proactive stance demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and responsible data stewardship. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the data processing while making a note to address the compliance issue later. This is ethically and regulatorily unsound because it knowingly violates data privacy principles and potentially breaks the law. It demonstrates a disregard for established compliance frameworks and exposes Jinko Solar to significant legal repercussions, including fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the concern as a minor technicality and continue as planned, assuming the data is not sensitive. This is a dangerous assumption and a failure of due diligence. Regulatory frameworks often have broad definitions of personal data, and even seemingly innocuous information can become sensitive when combined. Ignoring potential compliance issues based on personal judgment rather than expert review is a direct contravention of professional responsibility and regulatory oversight. A further incorrect approach is to attempt to resolve the issue independently without involving the compliance department, perhaps by making minor adjustments to the data. This is problematic as it bypasses the established channels for ensuring regulatory compliance. Without the expertise of the compliance team, any adjustments made may be insufficient or introduce new, unforeseen compliance risks. It also undermines the authority and function of the compliance department, creating a culture where regulatory adherence is seen as optional or a matter for individual discretion. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should follow a structured decision-making process. First, identify the core issue and its potential implications, including regulatory, ethical, and business risks. Second, consult relevant internal policies and external regulations. Third, seek guidance from the appropriate internal departments, such as compliance or legal. Fourth, prioritize adherence to regulations and ethical principles, even if it means delaying or modifying business objectives. Finally, document all decisions and actions taken. Question 3. The assessment process reveals that during a simulated client meeting for a potential Jinko Solar project, a prospective client, impressed by your presentation, offers you a high-value, personalized gift as a token of appreciation before the contract is finalized. This gift is not a standard promotional item and could be interpreted as an attempt to influence future decisions. How should you respond to maintain professional integrity and adhere to ethical business practices? Option A. Express your discomfort with the gift and immediately question the client's intentions, suggesting they reconsider their offer. Option B. Accept the gift and keep it discreet, as it is a personal gesture and not directly tied to the contract. Option C. Accept the gift, assuming it is a genuine gesture of goodwill, and plan to disclose it to your manager later. Option D. Politely decline the gift, explaining that company policy prohibits accepting gifts that could create a conflict of interest or the appearance of one, and express gratitude for their appreciation. The correct answer is D. Politely decline the gift, explaining that company policy prohibits accepting gifts that could create a conflict of interest or the appearance of one, and express gratitude for their appreciation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between a potential business opportunity and the ethical obligation to maintain integrity and avoid conflicts of interest. The hiring assessment for Jinko Solar requires candidates to demonstrate an understanding of ethical conduct and regulatory compliance, particularly in situations where personal relationships might influence professional judgment. Careful judgment is required to navigate the delicate balance between fostering professional relationships and upholding the company's commitment to fair and transparent dealings. The correct approach involves politely declining the offer of a personal gift that could be perceived as an inducement or create a sense of obligation, while clearly stating the company's policy on gifts and maintaining a professional demeanor. This approach aligns with ethical principles of impartiality and avoiding conflicts of interest. Specifically, it adheres to general principles of business ethics that prohibit accepting gifts that could influence decision-making or create the appearance of impropriety. While specific regulations for the Jinko solar hiring assessment test are not provided, the underlying ethical framework for professional conduct in the solar industry, and indeed most industries, emphasizes transparency and the avoidance of undue influence. An incorrect approach would be to accept the gift without considering its potential implications. This could lead to a perceived or actual conflict of interest, undermining the candidate's credibility and potentially violating ethical standards that require professionals to act in the best interest of their employer without personal bias. Another incorrect approach would be to accept the gift and then attempt to downplay its significance or conceal it. This demonstrates a lack of transparency and an unwillingness to adhere to ethical guidelines, suggesting a disregard for professional integrity. A third incorrect approach would be to confront the potential client aggressively about the inappropriateness of the gift. While the intention might be to uphold ethical standards, an aggressive response can damage the business relationship unnecessarily and is not the most professional way to handle such a situation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the ethical issue, recognizing that the gift could create a conflict of interest or the appearance thereof. 2. Consulting relevant policies, understanding the company's stance on gifts and entertainment. 3. Considering the impact, evaluating how accepting the gift might affect professional judgment and the company's reputation. 4. Choosing the most ethical course of action, opting for a response that upholds integrity and avoids compromise. Question 4. The risk matrix shows a low probability of a specific component failure in Jinko solar panels, but a recent surge in customer service inquiries from a particular region mentions similar performance anomalies. As a sales representative, you are aware that highlighting this potential issue could significantly impact your quarterly sales targets. What is the most ethically and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Continue to push for sale, assuming that if a significant issue arises, Jinko Solar will handle it through its warranty process without needing proactive intervention from sales. Option B. Ignore the customer feedback, as it is anecdotal and not yet confirmed by the Quality Assurance Department or reflected in official defect reports. Option C. Immediately report the customer feedback to the Quality Assurance Department and advocate for a thorough investigation, even if it means potentially delaying new sales or impacting targets. Option D. Downplay the customer feedback to your sales manager, emphasizing that the risk matrix indicates a low probability of failure and that the inquiries are likely isolated incidents. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the customer feedback to the Quality Assurance Department and advocate for a thorough investigation, even if it means potentially delaying new sales or impacting targets. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. The pressure to meet sales targets can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential risks, especially when those risks are not immediately apparent or have a low probability of occurring. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are not solely driven by short-term gains, but also consider the potential for harm to customers, the company's reputation, and its legal standing. The correct approach involves prioritizing customer well-being and regulatory compliance over immediate sales figures. This means proactively identifying and addressing potential product defects, even if they are not yet widespread or causing significant harm. By reporting the issue internally and advocating for a thorough investigation and potential recall, the employee demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and adherence to consumer protection regulations. This aligns with the principle of acting in the best interests of the customer and upholding the company's integrity, which are fundamental to sustainable business practices and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that involves downplaying the issue or delaying reporting to avoid impacting sales targets would be professionally unacceptable. This would constitute a failure to act with due diligence and could lead to significant harm to customers if the defect is serious. Ethically, it breaches the duty of care owed to consumers. From a regulatory standpoint, it could violate consumer protection laws that mandate disclosure of product defects and require companies to take reasonable steps to prevent harm. Such an approach prioritizes short-term financial gain over safety and compliance, creating substantial legal and reputational risks for Jinko Solar. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the feedback entirely because it is anecdotal, is also professionally unsound. While individual anecdotes may not always represent a systemic issue, a pattern of similar feedback from multiple sources warrants investigation. Ignoring such feedback demonstrates a lack of responsiveness to customer concerns and a failure to implement a robust quality control and feedback mechanism. This can lead to a loss of customer trust and could be viewed as negligence if a defect later emerges. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and document all customer feedback, regardless of its source or perceived significance. 2. Assess the nature and potential severity of the reported issue. 3. Consult internal quality control and engineering teams to investigate the feedback. 4. If a potential risk is identified, escalate the issue through appropriate internal channels, advocating for a thorough investigation and corrective actions. 5. Prioritize customer safety and regulatory compliance in all decision-making. 6. Maintain transparency with relevant stakeholders, both internally and externally, as required by regulations. Question 5. Cost-benefit analysis shows that securing a large contract with a new international distributor for Jinko Solar's solar panels would significantly boost quarterly profits. However, during internal quality control checks, a minor but recurring issue with the panel's sealing mechanism has been identified. While the issue is not currently causing immediate performance failures, it has the potential to lead to reduced lifespan or performance degradation over time. The sales team is eager to close the deal, emphasizing the financial benefits and suggesting that the sealing issue can be addressed in future production runs or through post-sale service, without informing the potential distributor of the current findings. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for Jinko Solar? Option A. Downplay the significance of the sealing issue to the distributor, highlighting the immediate cost savings and potential for future upgrades as sufficient mitigation. Option B. Sign the contract and focus on resolving the sealing issue internally without informing the distributor, relying on the fact that current performance is not immediately affected. Option C. Immediately disclose the identified sealing mechanism issue to the potential distributor, provide a detailed explanation of the potential risks, and propose a plan for rectification before finalizing the contract. Option D. Proceed with the contract. Inform the distributor of the potential for future improvements to the sealing mechanism, and address the issue in subsequent production batches. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the contract, inform the distributor of the potential for future improvements to the sealing mechanism, and address the issue in subsequent production batches. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it pits potential financial gains against ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet targets and secure a significant contract can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential risks, especially if the immediate benefits appear substantial. Careful judgment is required to ensure that short-term financial considerations do not compromise long-term integrity, stakeholder trust, and adherence to legal and ethical standards. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and thorough due diligence, even if it means delaying or potentially losing the contract. This aligns with the fundamental ethical principle of acting with integrity and honesty. Specifically, it requires Jinko Solar to fully disclose the identified quality control issues to the potential client and to propose a clear, actionable plan to rectify these issues before proceeding. This demonstrates a commitment to delivering high-quality products and upholding Jinko Solar's reputation. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing product safety and fair trading practices, implicitly or explicitly require companies to act in good faith and not mislead clients about the condition or quality of goods. Ethically, this approach respects the client's right to informed decision-making and prevents potential harm to end users. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the contract without full disclosure, hoping the issues will not be detected or can be resolved later. This constitutes a failure to act with integrity and honesty, potentially violating regulations related to misrepresentation and consumer protection. It also breaches the ethical duty of care owed to the client and end users. Another incorrect approach would be to downplay the severity of the quality control issues to the client, presenting them as minor or easily fixable without a concrete plan. This is a form of deception and undermines the client's ability to make an informed assessment, leading to potential regulatory breaches and reputational damage. Finally, attempting to conceal the issues internally and hoping they resolve themselves without client notification is a dereliction of duty and a direct violation of ethical and potentially legal obligations to be forthright about material information. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant stakeholders and their interests. Next, they must identify all applicable legal, regulatory, and ethical obligations. The core of the decision-making process involves evaluating potential courses of action against these obligations, considering both immediate and long-term consequences. When faced with a conflict between financial gain and ethical/regulatory compliance, the latter must always take precedence. A robust process involves seeking advice from legal and compliance departments, documenting all decisions and the rationale behind them, and always erring on the side of caution and transparency. Question 6. Investigation of Jinko Solar's internal communications regarding the initial testing phase of its new high-efficiency solar panel technology reveals that, while the panels demonstrate superior performance in optimal conditions, they exhibit a significant reduction in energy output in prolonged periods of high humidity and extreme heat, a factor not prominently featured in the initial marketing materials. A senior marketing executive suggests framing the launch narrative to focus exclusively on the breakthrough efficiency and downplaying the environmental condition limitations to avoid negative press and ensure a strong market reception. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for Jinko Solar to take in communicating about this new technology? Option A. Publicly disclose the performance limitations of the new solar panels under specific environmental conditions, alongside their demonstrated efficiencies, ensuring a balanced and transparent presentation of the technology's capabilities and limitations. Option B. Focus marketing materials and public announcements solely on the breakthrough efficiency of the new panels, omitting any mention of performance degradation in high humidity and extreme heat to maintain a positive market perception. Option C. Delay the public announcement of the performance limitations until further research can mitigate these issues, continuing with the current marketing strategy that highlights only the superior performance in ideal conditions. Option D. Include a brief, technical disclaimer about potential performance variations in adverse conditions within the product's detailed specifications document, but not in primary marketing or press releases. The correct answer is A. Publicly disclose the performance limitations of the new solar panels under specific environmental conditions, alongside their demonstrated efficiencies, ensuring a balanced and transparent presentation of the technology's capabilities and limitations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for positive public relations and the ethical obligation to disclose material information accurately and transparently. Jinko Solar, as a publicly traded entity, is subject to regulatory requirements that mandate timely and truthful disclosure of information that could impact investor decisions. The pressure to manage public perception, especially in the context of a new product launch, can create a temptation to downplay or omit potentially negative but material information. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. The correct approach involves a commitment to full and accurate disclosure, even if it presents a short-term challenge to public relations. This means acknowledging the potential performance limitations of the new solar panel technology in specific environmental conditions and providing clear, unbiased information to stakeholders. This aligns with the principles of transparency and investor protection mandated by regulatory frameworks governing public companies, ensuring that investors have the necessary information to make informed decisions. An approach that prioritizes positive spin over factual accuracy would be ethically and regulatorily unsound. This could involve selectively highlighting positive test results while omitting or minimizing negative findings, creating a misleading impression of the product's capabilities. Such an action would violate the duty of candor owed to investors and could lead to regulatory sanctions for misrepresentation or failure to disclose material information. Another incorrect approach would be to delay the disclosure of the performance limitations until they become undeniable or are discovered by external parties. Procrastination, driven by a desire to avoid immediate negative publicity, constitutes a failure to provide timely information. Regulatory bodies expect prompt disclosure of material events, and delaying such disclosures can be interpreted as an attempt to mislead the market. Finally, an approach that attempts to obscure the performance limitations through technical jargon or complex language, without providing clear and understandable explanations, would also be professionally unacceptable. While not an outright lie, it fails to meet the ethical standard of clear communication and can be seen as an attempt to circumvent the spirit of disclosure requirements. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the material information and its potential impact on stakeholders. 2. Consulting relevant company policies and regulatory guidelines. 3. Seeking advice from legal and compliance departments. 4. Communicating the information accurately and transparently, even if it is unfavorable. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action. Question 7. The assessment process reveals that a promising candidate for a key engineering role at Jinko Solar has listed a significant project on their resume that they claim to have led. However, during a reference check, a former colleague expressed doubt about the candidate's level of involvement, suggesting the candidate may have overstated their contribution. The hiring manager is under pressure to fill the position quickly due to an upcoming product launch. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the Jinko Solar hiring team? Option A. Inform the candidate that their resume is being questioned and ask them to provide proof of their leadership role on the project, potentially jeopardizing their candidacy and creating an adversarial interaction. Option B. Conduct a thorough, independent verification of the candidate's claimed project involvement, potentially by requesting further documentation or speaking to other individuals familiar with the project before making a final hiring decision. Option C. Decline to hire the candidate based on the single negative reference without further investigation to avoid any potential risks. Option D. Proceed with hiring the candidate immediately, prioritizing the urgent need for the role and assuming the colleague's feedback might be biased or inaccurate. Correct answer is D. Proceed with hiring the candidate immediately, prioritizing the urgent need for the role and assuming the colleague's feedback might be biased or inaccurate. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate need for talent with the ethical obligation to ensure a fair and transparent hiring process. The pressure to fill a critical role quickly can tempt individuals to overlook potential irregularities, but maintaining integrity is paramount. Careful judgment is needed to identify and address any ethical breaches without jeopardizing the company's reputation or legal standing. The correct approach involves a commitment to ethical conduct and adherence to Jinko Solar's internal hiring policies and relevant employment laws. This means thoroughly investigating the candidate's claims, verifying information independently, and making a hiring decision based on merit and qualifications, not on potentially misleading information or undue influence. This upholds principles of fairness, equal opportunity, and honesty, which are foundational to ethical business practices and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the candidate's concerns without proper investigation, potentially leading to a biased hiring decision. This could violate principles of fairness and equal opportunity, and if the candidate's claims of prior experience are substantiated, it could expose Jinko Solar to legal challenges related to discrimination or misrepresentation. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed with the hiring based solely on the candidate's assertion of having completed a project, without independent verification. This risks hiring an unqualified individual, which can lead to performance issues, project delays, and potential financial losses for Jinko Solar. It also undermines the integrity of the hiring process and sets a precedent for accepting unsubstantiated claims. A further incorrect approach would be to confront the candidate aggressively or accusatorily. While directness is important, an aggressive stance can be counterproductive, potentially alienating the candidate and hindering a thorough investigation. It also risks creating a hostile environment and could lead to reputational damage if mishandled. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and document all concerns raised. 2. Initiate a fair and impartial investigation to verify all relevant information. 3. Consult internal policies and relevant legal guidelines. 4. Make a decision based on objective evidence and established criteria. 5. Communicate the decision clearly and professionally. 6. Maintain confidentiality throughout the process. Question 8. The audit findings indicate that a recent batch of solar panels produced by Jinko Solar may not meet the stringent quality control standards previously communicated to investors and customers, potentially impacting their long-term performance and warranty claims. The internal audit team has identified discrepancies in testing procedures that could have been overlooked during routine quality checks. How should Jinko Solar's management respond to these findings? Option A. Delay any public or internal reporting of the audit findings until a full resolution of the potential issues is achieved, to avoid causing undue alarm among investors and customers. Option B. Instruct the internal audit team to reevaluate the findings with a focus on minimizing the perceived impact, and only report issues that are definitively critical and cannot be explained away. Option C. Immediately disclose the potential quality control issues to relevant stakeholders, initiate a thorough investigation into the root cause, and develop a comprehensive plan for remediation and transparent communication. Option D. Proceed with the current sales and distribution of the affected batch of solar panels, while privately initiating a review of quality control processes for future production, without public disclosure of the current findings. The correct answer is C. Immediately disclose the potential quality control issues to relevant stakeholders, initiate a thorough investigation into the root cause, and develop a comprehensive plan for remediation and transparent communication. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet targets can lead to overlooking or downplaying potential issues, creating a conflict between personal gain, e.g., bonuses tied to performance, and professional integrity. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are not solely driven by short-term financial outcomes, but also by adherence to ethical principles and regulatory requirements. The correct approach involves a commitment to transparency and accurate reporting, even when it might have negative short-term financial implications for Jinko Solar. This means proactively disclosing the identified quality control issues to relevant stakeholders, including management and potentially regulatory bodies, if required by law. This approach aligns with the ethical duty of honesty and integrity, which are fundamental to maintaining trust with customers, investors, and the public. Furthermore, it adheres to regulatory frameworks that mandate accurate financial reporting and product quality standards. By addressing the issue head-on, Jinko Solar can mitigate future risks, protect its reputation, and demonstrate a commitment to responsible business practices. An incorrect approach would be to attempt to conceal or minimize the quality control issues. This could involve manipulating data, delaying reporting, or pressuring the audit team to overlook findings. Such actions would constitute a breach of ethical duties, potentially leading to regulatory penalties, legal liabilities, and severe damage to Jinko Solar's reputation. It undermines the integrity of the audit process and erodes trust among all stakeholders. Another incorrect approach would be to address the issue internally without proper documentation or independent verification, which could lead to inconsistent application of corrective measures and a failure to meet regulatory standards. This approach risks perpetuating the problem and failing to provide assurance to external parties. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the ethical and regulatory implications of the situation. 2. Gathering all relevant facts and understanding the potential consequences of different actions. 3. Consulting with relevant internal and external experts, e.g., legal counsel, compliance officers if necessary. 4. Choosing the course of action that upholds integrity, transparency, and compliance, even if it presents short-term challenges. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen approach. Question 9. When evaluating a request from Jinko Solar's marketing department to create a promotional video highlighting their cutting-edge green manufacturing processes, which approach best upholds professional and ethical standards, assuming the jurisdiction has regulations against misleading advertising and requires accurate representation of environmental claims. Option A. Develop a video that focuses exclusively on the most advanced and environmentally friendly aspects of Jinko Solar's operations, using aspirational language and visually appealing imagery to create a strong positive impression, without explicitly detailing the full scope of their manufacturing or any potential environmental trade-offs. Option B. Create a video that accurately depicts Jinko Solar's green manufacturing processes, including showcasing specific technologies and quantifiable environmental benefits, while also transparently acknowledging any areas where improvements are ongoing or where certain processes may still have environmental considerations, ensuring all claims are substantiated by verifiable data. Option C. Produce a video that emphasizes Jinko Solar's commitment to sustainability through general statements and broad promises, relying on the company's reputation to convey a sense of environmental responsibility without needing to present specific details or data about their manufacturing processes. Option D. Focus the video on the positive economic impacts of Jinko Solar's operations, such as job creation and local investment, and briefly mention their efforts towards green manufacturing without providing any specific details or evidence, as the primary goal is to boost investor confidence. The correct answer is A. Develop a video that focuses exclusively on the most advanced and environmentally friendly aspects of Jinko Solar's operations, using aspirational language and visually appealing imagery to create a strong positive impression, without explicitly detailing the full scope of their manufacturing or any potential environmental trade-offs. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for positive publicity and the ethical obligation to provide accurate and unbiased information. Jinko Solar, like any publicly scrutinized entity, faces pressure to present its operations favorably. However, the ethical imperative is to ensure that any public statements or materials are truthful, not misleading, and do not exploit vulnerabilities or create false impressions, especially when dealing with potentially sensitive information related to environmental impact or supply chain practices. Careful judgment is required to balance corporate interests with professional integrity and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves prioritizing factual accuracy and transparency. This means ensuring that any information shared with the public, including marketing materials or responses to inquiries, is rigorously verified, avoids exaggeration, and clearly communicates any limitations or uncertainties. This aligns with general principles of professional conduct, and depending on the specific jurisdiction's advertising standards and corporate disclosure regulations, would prevent misrepresentation and uphold consumer trust. For instance, if the jurisdiction has specific rules against misleading advertising or requires disclosure of material information, this approach directly adheres to those mandates. An incorrect approach would be to selectively highlight positive environmental initiatives while downplaying or omitting any negative impacts or ongoing challenges. This could be considered misleading advertising or a failure to provide a fair and balanced representation, potentially violating regulations that prohibit deceptive practices. Another incorrect approach would be to use vague or aspirational language that creates an impression of current achievement without concrete evidence, which can also be seen as deceptive. Furthermore, failing to disclose relevant information that a reasonable person would consider important in evaluating Jinko Solar's environmental claims would be a significant ethical and potentially regulatory failure. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical and regulatory obligations. This involves asking, what are the relevant laws and professional standards governing this situation? And what is the truthful and complete picture? The next step is to consider the potential impact of different actions on stakeholders, including the public, regulators, and the company itself. Finally, professionals should choose the course of action that best upholds integrity, transparency, and compliance, even if it means foregoing a short-term reputational gain. Question 10. Benchmark analysis indicates that Jinko Solar is experiencing a significant, albeit temporary, disruption in its supply chain for a critical component used in its solar panel manufacturing. While the issue is expected to be resolved within a few weeks, it has the potential to cause a slight delay in meeting some upcoming production targets. A senior executive is concerned that disclosing this information publicly, even with assurances of a swift resolution, might negatively impact the company's stock price and investor sentiment in the short term. The executive suggests framing the upcoming quarterly report in a way that emphasizes ongoing operational strengths and only briefly mentions minor logistical challenges, without detailing the specific component or the potential impact on production timelines. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for Jinko Solar in this situation? Option A. Inform key institutional investors privately about the supply chain issue and its potential impact, while providing a more generalized statement to the broader public and the media. Option B. Delay any public mention of the supply chain issue until it is fully resolved and has no discernible impact on the company's financial performance, at which point it can be presented as a successfully overcome operational hurdle. Option C. Publicly disclose the specific nature of the supply chain disruption, its potential impact on production targets, and the expected timeline for resolution, while also highlighting the company's proactive measures to mitigate the issue and its overall operational resilience. Option D. Issue a press release that broadly mentions minor logistical challenges affecting operations, without providing specific details about the supply chain issue or its potential impact on production targets, while focusing the quarterly report on positive operational achievements. The correct answer is C. Publicly disclose the specific nature of the supply chain disruption, its potential impact on production targets, and the expected timeline for resolution, while also highlighting the company's proactive measures to mitigate the issue and its overall operational resilience. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for positive public perception and the ethical obligation to disclose material information accurately and transparently. Jinko Solar, as a publicly traded entity, is subject to regulatory oversight that mandates fair disclosure and prohibits misleading statements. The pressure to present a favorable image can tempt individuals to downplay or omit negative information, which can have serious consequences for investors, regulators, and the company's long-term reputation. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing pressures and uphold ethical standards. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and accurate reporting, even when it might present a less favorable immediate picture. This means acknowledging the potential impact of the supply chain issue on production timelines and financial projections, and communicating this information to relevant stakeholders in a timely and appropriate manner. This aligns with regulatory requirements for disclosure of material information and upholds the ethical principle of honesty and integrity. By proactively addressing the issue, Jinko Solar can mitigate potential damage and maintain investor confidence through demonstrated accountability. An incorrect approach would be to deliberately omit or significantly downplay the severity of the supply chain disruption. This could be perceived as misleading investors and the market, violating regulations that require disclosure of material information that could affect investment decisions. Such an action erodes trust and can lead to regulatory penalties, lawsuits, and severe reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to provide vague or overly optimistic statements that do not reflect the reality of the situation. This also constitutes a failure in transparency and can be seen as an attempt to manipulate market perception, leading to similar negative consequences as outright omission. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical and regulatory obligations. This involves consulting relevant company policies, codes of conduct, and applicable laws and regulations. They should then assess the potential impact of different courses of action on all stakeholders, including investors, employees, and the company's reputation. Seeking advice from legal counsel or compliance officers is crucial when uncertainty exists. Ultimately, the decision should be guided by a commitment to honesty, integrity, and adherence to regulatory requirements, even if it involves difficult conversations or less favorable immediate outcomes. Question 11. Analysis of a situation where Jinko Solar is preparing its annual report. While the company has achieved significant milestones in new product development, there have been unforeseen supply chain disruptions that have impacted production timelines for a key product line, leading to some customer dissatisfaction. The marketing department is pushing to heavily emphasize the product development successes in the report and press releases, suggesting that the supply chain issues be mentioned only briefly and in a way that minimizes their impact. As a Jinko Solar employee responsible for report accuracy, how should you approach this situation to uphold professional standards? Option A. Advocate for a balanced presentation in the annual report and communications, detailing both the product development successes and the supply chain challenges, including their impact on timelines and customer relations, while ensuring all statements are factually accurate and provide necessary context. Option B. Propose omitting any mention of supply chain disruptions from the public-facing annual report and press releases, arguing that these are internal operational matters that do not need to be disclosed externally. Option C. Support the marketing department's recommendation to focus primarily on the positive achievements of new product development, briefly mentioning supply chain issues as minor, temporary setbacks that have been largely resolved. Option D. Suggest highlighting the product development successes with slightly exaggerated claims of market readiness and impact, while downplaying the supply chain issues as minor logistical hurdles that are already overcome. The correct answer is A. Advocate for a balanced presentation in the annual report and communications, detailing both the product development successes and the supply chain challenges, including their impact on timelines and customer relations, while ensuring all statements are factually accurate and provide necessary context. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to present a positive image and the ethical obligation to disclose material information accurately and without misleading stakeholders. Jinko Solar, as a publicly recognized entity, is subject to regulatory expectations regarding transparency and fair dealing. The challenge lies in navigating the pressure to highlight achievements while ensuring that any omissions or selective disclosures do not create a false impression or violate disclosure requirements. Careful judgment is required to balance commercial interests with legal and ethical duties. The correct approach involves a commitment to full and fair disclosure, even when it might temper an otherwise positive narrative. This means acknowledging the challenges or setbacks alongside the successes, ensuring that all material information is presented in a balanced and truthful manner. This aligns with the principles of corporate governance and ethical conduct expected of companies operating within regulated markets. Specifically, it upholds the duty to avoid misleading statements and to provide information that is not only accurate, but also complete enough to prevent misinterpretation by investors, customers, or the public. This approach prioritizes integrity and long-term trust over short-term reputational gains. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on highlighting positive achievements while omitting or downplaying negative aspects would be professionally unacceptable. This constitutes a failure to provide a true and fair view, potentially misleading stakeholders about the company's actual performance or prospects. Such selective disclosure can violate regulatory requirements related to accurate reporting and can erode trust. Another incorrect approach, which might involve exaggerating the significance of minor positive developments to distract from larger issues, also fails the test of professional integrity. This is a form of misrepresentation. Furthermore, an approach that prioritizes avoiding any mention of challenges to maintain a flawless public image, even if it means omitting crucial context, is ethically unsound and can lead to regulatory scrutiny for failing to provide complete and accurate information. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant stakeholders and their information needs. They must then assess the materiality of all information, both positive and negative. The core principle should be to provide information that is accurate, complete, and not misleading. If there is any doubt about whether information is presented in a balanced way, seeking advice from legal or compliance departments is crucial. The ultimate goal is to foster transparency and maintain the trust of all parties involved, adhering strictly to the spirit and letter of applicable regulations and ethical codes. Question 12. The efficiency study reveals that a proposed material substitution in Jinko Solar's manufacturing process could significantly reduce production costs. However, preliminary internal assessments suggest this substitution might marginally impact the long-term degradation rate of the solar panels, though it would still meet the minimum warranty specifications. What is the most ethically responsible course of action for the Jinko Solar product development team? Option A. Proceed with the material substitution, but inform sales teams to emphasize the cost benefits to customers, without explicitly mentioning the potential degradation impact. Option B. Implement the material substitution and rely on the existing quality control measures to catch any significant issues that may arise during the product's lifespan. Option C. Halt the proposed material substitution and initiate a comprehensive, independent third-party study to thoroughly assess the long-term performance and potential risks before any decision is made. Option D. Implement the material substitution immediately to achieve the cost savings, as the panels will still meet minimum warranty specifications. Correct answer is D. Implement the material substitution immediately to achieve the cost savings, as the panels will still meet minimum warranty specifications. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's pursuit of efficiency and cost reduction with the ethical obligation to ensure product quality and safety, especially when dealing with potentially critical components like solar panels. The pressure to meet aggressive targets can lead to compromises that might not be immediately apparent but could have significant long-term consequences for Jinko Solar's reputation and customer trust. Careful judgment is required to identify and address potential ethical conflicts before they manifest as serious issues. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy. This means immediately escalating the findings of the efficiency study to relevant stakeholders, including quality control, engineering, and senior management. The focus should be on a thorough investigation of the potential impact of the proposed material substitutions on product performance and longevity, adhering strictly to Jinko Solar's internal quality standards and any applicable industry regulations. This approach upholds ethical principles of honesty, integrity, and responsibility towards customers and the company. It prioritizes long-term sustainability and risk mitigation over short-term cost savings, aligning with best practices in corporate governance and product stewardship. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the material substitution without further investigation, driven solely by the cost-saving potential highlighted in the study. This would represent a failure to uphold the duty of care to customers and a disregard for product quality, potentially violating industry standards and consumer protection laws. Another incorrect approach would be to downplay or conceal the potential risks identified in the study to avoid disrupting the efficiency targets. This constitutes a breach of ethical conduct and could lead to severe reputational damage and legal repercussions if product failures occur. A third incorrect approach would be to implement the substitution, but only after a superficial review that does not adequately assess the long-term implications, demonstrating a lack of due diligence and a failure to act with professional skepticism. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying potential conflicts between business objectives and ethical/regulatory obligations. 2. Gathering all relevant information and assessing potential risks and impacts. 3. Consulting with relevant departments and seeking expert advice. 4. Escalating concerns through appropriate channels, documenting all steps taken. 5. Making decisions based on a comprehensive understanding of consequences, not just immediate benefits. 6. Maintaining transparency and accountability throughout the process. Question 13. The assessment process reveals that a key supplier for Jinko Solar is experiencing significant production delays, which are projected to impact the company's Q3 and Q4 revenue targets by approximately 15%. This information has not yet been publicly disclosed. As a member of the investor relations team, you are preparing materials for an upcoming investor roadshow. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Proactively include detailed information about the supplier delays and their projected financial impact in the investor roadshow materials, and prepare to discuss mitigation strategies. Option B. Wait until the end of the roadshow to disclose the information, or only mention it in a private meeting with a select few investors. Option C. Omit any mention of the supplier delays from the roadshow materials, focusing only on positive aspects of Jinko Solar's performance and future outlook. Option D. Include a vague statement about potential supply chain challenges without specifying the nature or magnitude of the impact, hoping investors will not inquire further. The correct answer is A. Proactively include detailed information about the supplier delays and their projected financial impact in the investor roadshow materials, and prepare to discuss mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with the ethical obligation to provide accurate and transparent information to potential investors. The pressure to secure funding can create a temptation to downplay or omit negative information. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all material information is disclosed, even if it is unfavorable. The correct approach involves proactively disclosing the identified production delays and their potential impact on Jinko Solar's financial performance. This demonstrates integrity and adherence to regulatory requirements for full and fair disclosure. By being upfront, Jinko Solar builds trust with investors and regulators, which is crucial for long-term sustainability and reputation. This aligns with the principles of ethical conduct and regulatory compliance that mandate transparency in financial reporting and investor communications. An incorrect approach of omitting or downplaying the production delays would be a failure to comply with regulations that require disclosure of material information that could influence an investor's decision. This omission could be construed as misleading or deceptive conduct, leading to severe penalties, reputational damage, and legal liabilities for Jinko Solar and its employees. Another incorrect approach of delaying disclosure until the last possible moment, or only revealing it in a way that is difficult to understand, also undermines the principle of timely and clear communication, potentially creating an unfair advantage for those who receive the information late or incompletely. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves identifying potential ethical conflicts, understanding relevant legal and regulatory obligations, seeking advice from legal or compliance departments when necessary, and choosing the course of action that upholds the highest standards of integrity and transparency, even when it presents short-term challenges. Question 14. Research into a potential new client for Jinko Solar reveals that the primary contact person is a former close colleague with whom the Jinko Solar sales representative has a significant personal history. This former colleague is now in a senior procurement role at the prospective client company. The sales representative believes this personal relationship could facilitate a smoother negotiation and potentially lead to a substantial contract for Jinko Solar. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for the Jinko Solar sales representative in this situation? Option A. Withdraw from the negotiation entirely without informing anyone at Jinko Solar to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Option B. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct manager and the company's compliance department, seeking guidance on how to proceed and offering to recuse themselves if deemed necessary. Option C. Proceed with the negotiation, leveraging the personal relationship to secure the contract, and only disclose the relationship if it becomes apparent during the process. Option D. Inform the former colleague that the personal relationship should be disregarded and proceed with the negotiation as if it were a standard business interaction. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct manager and the company's compliance department, seeking guidance on how to proceed and offering to recuse themselves if deemed necessary. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between a potential business opportunity and the ethical obligation to maintain integrity and avoid conflicts of interest. The pressure to secure a significant contract for Jinko Solar could lead to overlooking or downplaying ethical concerns. Careful judgment is required to ensure that business decisions align with regulatory requirements and professional ethical standards, rather than solely focusing on immediate financial gain. The correct approach involves proactively disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the relevant internal stakeholders at Jinko Solar and seeking guidance on how to proceed. This demonstrates a commitment to transparency, ethical conduct, and adherence to company policy and regulatory frameworks. By disclosing the situation, the employee allows Jinko Solar to assess the situation objectively, manage the conflict appropriately, and ensure compliance with all applicable laws and ethical guidelines. This proactive measure protects both the individual employee and the company from potential regulatory breaches and reputational damage. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the negotiation without disclosure, hoping the relationship with the former colleague's new company remains confidential, or that the personal connection does not influence the decision-making process. This fails to acknowledge the inherent risk of perceived or actual bias, which can undermine the fairness and integrity of the procurement process. Ethically, it violates principles of transparency and fair dealing. Legally, depending on the specific regulations governing procurement and corporate conduct, it could lead to accusations of impropriety, favoritism, or even bribery, resulting in severe penalties for both the individual and Jinko Solar. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately withdraw from the negotiation without any communication or consultation. While this avoids direct involvement in a potential conflict, it may not be the most constructive or ethically sound solution. It could mean missing a valuable business opportunity for Jinko Solar without a proper assessment of the risks and mitigation strategies. Ethically, it might be seen as an overreaction or a failure to explore all avenues for managing the conflict responsibly. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's code of conduct and relevant regulations regarding conflicts of interest. The first step is to identify any potential conflicts. If a conflict is identified, the next step is to assess its nature and severity. Following this, proactive disclosure to the appropriate authority within the organization is crucial. This allows for a collective decision on how to manage or mitigate the conflict, which might involve recusal, independent oversight, or other measures. The ultimate goal is to ensure that all business dealings are conducted with integrity, fairness, and in full compliance with legal and ethical standards. Question 15. The monitoring system demonstrates a recurring discrepancy in the inventory valuation for a significant product line at Jinko Solar, which, if not corrected, could materially misstate the company's reported profits for the current quarter. You are a mid-level manager in the finance department who discovered this issue. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Continue to monitor the situation for another reporting period to see if the discrepancy resolves itself naturally, to avoid disrupting current financial reporting processes. Option B. Immediately report the discrepancy to your direct supervisor and the head of internal audit, providing all supporting documentation, and recommend a thorough investigation and correction in line with accounting standards. Option C. Adjust the inventory valuation figures discretely to align with the expected profit margin, assuming the discrepancy is a minor system error that will self-correct. Option D. Discuss the discrepancy with a trusted colleague in another department to gauge their opinion before deciding whether to report it, to avoid causing unnecessary alarm. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the discrepancy to your direct supervisor and the head of internal audit, providing all supporting documentation, and recommend a thorough investigation and correction in line with accounting standards. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's operational efficiency and potential cost savings with the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of financial reporting and compliance with regulatory standards. The pressure to meet targets, coupled with the discovery of a potential misstatement, creates a conflict of interest and necessitates a rigorous and ethical decision-making process. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the issue to the appropriate internal stakeholders, such as the audit committee or senior management, and ensuring that the identified discrepancy is thoroughly investigated and rectified in accordance with accounting principles and relevant regulations. This upholds the principle of transparency and accuracy in financial reporting, which is paramount for investor confidence and regulatory compliance. Specifically, adherence to accounting standards, e.g., GAAP or IFRS, depending on the jurisdiction specified for the exam, and any relevant securities regulations, e.g., SEC rules in the US, FCA rules in the UK, would mandate accurate financial representation. An incorrect approach would be to overlook or downplay the discrepancy, perhaps due to the belief that it is immaterial or that reporting it could negatively impact performance metrics. This failure to address potential misstatements directly violates the duty of care and the ethical obligation to present a true and fair view of the company's financial position. Such an action could lead to regulatory sanctions, legal liabilities, and severe reputational damage for Jinko Solar. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to correct the discrepancy without proper documentation or consultation with relevant departments, potentially leading to further errors or an incomplete resolution. This bypasses established internal controls and audit procedures, undermining the reliability of financial information. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the nature and potential impact of the discrepancy. They should then consult relevant internal policies, accounting standards, and regulatory requirements. Open and honest communication with supervisors and relevant departments, e.g., finance, internal audit is crucial. If the discrepancy appears significant or has potential compliance implications, immediate escalation to the audit committee or legal counsel is warranted. The decision-making process should prioritize ethical conduct, regulatory compliance, and the accuracy of financial information above short-term performance pressures. Question 16. Comparative studies suggest that sales teams often face pressure to meet targets. If you are a sales representative for Jinko Solar and a potential client expresses concerns about the long-term performance of solar panels in a specific climate, what is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach to address their concerns? Option A. Provide the client with detailed, data-backed information on Jinko Solar's product performance under various simulated and real-world conditions, including any known limitations or specific installation requirements for that climate, even if it means a longer discussion. Option B. Agree with the client's concerns and suggest that Jinko Solar's products might not be the best fit for their specific climate, potentially losing the sale, but avoiding further discussion on performance specifics. Option C. Focus on the immediate cost savings and attractive financing options, suggesting that any performance concerns are likely overstated by competitors. Option D. Emphasize Jinko Solar's industry-leading warranty and assure the client that performance issues are extremely rare, without delving into specific climate-related performance data. The correct answer is A. Provide the client with detailed, data-backed information on Jinko Solar's product performance under various simulated and real-world conditions, including any known limitations or specific installation requirements for that climate, even if it means a longer discussion. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. The pressure to meet sales targets can create an environment where shortcuts or misleading practices might seem appealing, but adhering to regulatory frameworks and ethical principles is paramount. Careful judgment is required to navigate the conflict between performance metrics and responsible business conduct. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and accurate representation of Jinko Solar's products. This means ensuring that all marketing materials and sales pitches are factually correct and do not exaggerate performance capabilities or omit crucial limitations. This aligns with the principles of fair dealing and consumer protection, which are fundamental to maintaining trust and avoiding regulatory scrutiny. Specifically, in the context of a hiring assessment, demonstrating an understanding of these principles shows an awareness of responsible business practices and a commitment to ethical conduct, which are crucial for any employee, especially in sales or client-facing roles. An incorrect approach that involves exaggerating product efficiency to secure a sale fails to uphold the principle of honesty and integrity. This can lead to customer dissatisfaction, reputational damage for Jinko Solar, and potential regulatory action for misleading advertising. Another incorrect approach, which is to downplay or omit information about installation requirements or potential performance variations, is also ethically unsound and can result in contractual disputes and legal liabilities. Finally, an approach that prioritizes closing the deal at all costs, even if it means bending the truth, demonstrates a disregard for ethical standards and regulatory compliance, which is unacceptable in any professional setting. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical and regulatory considerations. This involves understanding the relevant laws and guidelines governing sales and marketing practices. Next, they should evaluate the potential consequences of each possible action, considering the impact on customers, the company, and their own professional integrity. When faced with a conflict, prioritizing adherence to ethical principles and regulatory requirements over short-term gains is essential. Seeking guidance from supervisors or legal counsel, when in doubt, is also a critical step in ensuring responsible decision-making. Question 17. Strategic planning requires Jinko Solar to consider the ethical implications of its sales targets and potential product quality issues. If a significant batch of solar panels is found to have a quality defect that could lead to performance issues and potential recalls, but the sales team is pushing to close large deals with this batch before the issue becomes widely known. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for Jinko Solar's management? Option A. Delay any public disclosure of the quality issues until a full internal investigation is completed and a definitive plan for rectification is in place, which could take several weeks. Option B. Immediately disclose the quality concerns and potential impact to all relevant parties, including potential investors and customers, and halt sales of the affected batch until a resolution is found. Option C. Proceed with the sales of the affected batch, instructing the sales team to address any customer inquiries about quality on a case-by-case basis, and plan to address recalls if they arise. Option D. Inform the sales team to subtly downplay the quality concerns to secure the deals, with a plan to rectify any issues post-sale through warranty claims. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the quality concerns and potential impact to all relevant parties, including potential investors and customers, and halt sales of the affected batch until a resolution is found. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. Jinko Solar, as a publicly traded entity, is subject to stringent disclosure requirements and ethical standards designed to protect investors and maintain market integrity. The pressure to meet ambitious sales targets, coupled with the potential for significant personal bonuses, can create a conflict of interest, tempting individuals to overlook or downplay critical information. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all decisions are made with transparency and adherence to the highest ethical standards. Even when faced with commercial pressures, the correct approach involves prioritizing accurate and timely disclosure of material information to potential investors, even if it negatively impacts short-term sales figures. This aligns with the fundamental principles of securities regulation, which mandate that all investors have access to the same material information. Specifically, under the regulatory framework governing publicly traded companies, assuming a jurisdiction like the U.S., for example, which is common for global hiring assessments unless otherwise specified. This approach upholds the spirit and letter of laws such as the Securities Act of 1933 and the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. These laws, along with the rules and guidance from regulatory bodies like the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, emphasize full and fair disclosure. By proactively informing potential investors about the quality concerns and the potential for product recalls, Jinko Solar demonstrates a commitment to transparency and investor protection. This builds trust and safeguards the company's reputation and long-term value, preventing potentially larger financial and legal repercussions down the line. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the sales without disclosing the quality concerns. This constitutes a failure to provide material information, which is a direct violation of securities laws and ethical codes. Such an action could be construed as misleading investors, potentially leading to accusations of fraud or misrepresentation. The regulatory and ethical failure lies in prioritizing short-term financial gain over the fundamental duty of honest and transparent dealings with the market. Another incorrect approach would be to delay the disclosure until the quality issues are fully resolved or a recall is imminent. This also constitutes a failure to disclose material information in a timely manner. The market has a right to know about significant risks that could affect the value of their investment. Delaying this information deprives investors of the opportunity to make informed decisions, thereby undermining market fairness and integrity. The ethical failure here is one of omission and a lack of good faith in dealings with stakeholders. A third incorrect approach would be to attempt to downplay the severity of the quality concerns to the sales team or potential investors. This is a form of misrepresentation, even if not an outright lie. It still involves providing incomplete or misleading information, which is ethically reprehensible and legally perilous. The regulatory and ethical failure is in actively obscuring the truth, thereby deceiving stakeholders and violating the principles of honesty and integrity. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's ethical code and relevant regulatory requirements. When faced with a potential conflict between commercial interests and disclosure obligations, professionals should always err on the side of transparency. This involves consulting with legal and compliance departments to ensure that all actions are in full compliance with applicable laws and regulations. A robust internal reporting mechanism should allow employees to raise concerns without fear of reprisal. Ultimately, maintaining the trust of investors and the public is paramount to the long-term success and sustainability of any company. Question 18. Regulatory review indicates that a Jinko solar sales representative has identified a significant potential client for a new solar panel model. However, internal testing has revealed that under specific, albeit uncommon, environmental conditions, the panel's energy output can be temporarily reduced by up to 15%. The sales representative is under considerable pressure to meet quarterly targets and is considering whether to highlight this performance limitation to the client during the sales pitch. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for the Jinko solar sales representative in this situation? Option A. Proceed with the sale without detailed disclosure, but make a note to inform the client of the potential limitation if the specific environmental conditions are ever encountered. Option B. Fully disclose the potential for temporary energy output reduction under specific conditions to the client, explaining the circumstances and providing data, while still emphasizing the panel's overall benefits and performance. Option C. Inform the client that the panel's performance is guaranteed under all conditions and focus on the company's strong warranty policy to mitigate any potential future issues. Option D. Omit any mention of the potential performance limitation, focusing solely on the panel's average performance metrics and benefits to secure the sale, assuming the specific conditions are unlikely to occur. The correct answer is B. Fully disclose the potential for temporary energy output reduction under specific conditions to the client, explaining the circumstances and providing data, while still emphasizing the panel's overall benefits and performance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. The pressure to meet sales targets can create a conflict of interest, potentially leading to decisions that compromise integrity. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation without violating ethical principles or regulatory frameworks. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to regulatory guidelines. This means clearly communicating the limitations of the product to potential clients and ensuring all sales practices align with the Jinko Solar Hiring Assessment Test's specified regulatory framework. This upholds the company's reputation, builds trust with customers, and avoids potential legal repercussions. An incorrect approach would be to downplay or omit information about the product's performance limitations to secure a sale. This is ethically unsound as it misleads the client and violates principles of fair dealing. From a regulatory standpoint, such actions could be construed as deceptive trade practices, leading to fines, sanctions, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed with the sale without fully understanding the implications of the performance limitations, hoping that the issues will not arise or can be resolved later. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for potential client dissatisfaction and regulatory scrutiny. It prioritizes short-term gain over long-term responsibility. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to blame the sales team for the product's limitations without addressing the core issue of transparency and accurate representation. While sales team training is important, fundamental problem lies in how product information is communicated to clients. This deflects responsibility and fails to resolve the ethical dilemma. The professional decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the ethical and regulatory conflict. 2. Consulting the relevant Jinko Solar Hiring Assessment Test regulatory framework and internal company policies. 3. Prioritizing transparency and accurate information dissemination. 4. Seeking guidance from legal or compliance departments if uncertainties exist. 5. Documenting all decisions and communications. Question 19. Consider a scenario where a sales manager at Jinko Solar is under significant pressure to meet quarterly sales targets. They are aware that a particular solar panel model has experienced a slight, but statistically insignificant, dip in performance in certain environmental conditions, which has impacted recent sales. Manager is considering whether to highlight this minor issue in their internal report to senior management and external investor communications, or to focus solely on the overall positive sales trends and downplay the performance anomaly. Option A. The sales manager should accurately report the minor performance anomaly in all communications, alongside the overall positive sales trends, to ensure transparency and uphold ethical reporting standards. Option B. The sales manager should exaggerate the positive aspects of the sales performance and frame the minor performance anomaly as a temporary, isolated incident that is not indicative of broader issues. Option C. The sales manager should omit any mention of the performance anomaly in both internal and external communications, focusing only on the positive sales figures to avoid negatively impacting investor perception. Option D. The sales manager should only mention the performance anomaly in internal reports to senior management, but not in any external communications to investors. Correct answer is A. The sales manager should accurately report the minor performance anomaly in all communications, alongside the overall positive sales trends, to ensure transparency and uphold ethical reporting standards. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with the ethical obligation to provide accurate and transparent information to potential investors. The pressure to meet sales targets can create a conflict of interest, where the temptation to misrepresent product performance for short-term gain clashes with long-term integrity and regulatory compliance. Careful judgment is required to navigate this conflict without compromising ethical standards or legal obligations. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and accuracy in all communications, even if it means acknowledging a temporary shortfall in sales performance. This aligns with the principles of fair dealing and investor protection, which are fundamental to maintaining market confidence and regulatory compliance. Specifically, adhering to the Jinko solar hiring assessment test's implied regulatory framework, which would likely emphasize honesty in financial reporting and marketing, is paramount. Providing a truthful assessment of the situation, even if unfavorable, prevents misleading investors and avoids potential legal repercussions for misrepresentation. This upholds the company's reputation and fosters sustainable investor relationships built on trust. An incorrect approach would be to inflate sales figures or make unsubstantiated claims about future performance to mask the current shortfall. This constitutes a misrepresentation of material facts, which is a serious ethical and regulatory violation. Such actions can lead to severe penalties, including fines, sanctions, and reputational damage, and erode investor confidence. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the issue and hope it resolves itself without any communication. This demonstrates a lack of accountability and can be interpreted as a deliberate attempt to conceal negative information, which is also a breach of ethical and regulatory duties. Finally, selectively sharing only positive information while omitting crucial negative details is a form of selective disclosure, which is misleading and unethical. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the ethical and regulatory implications of any proposed action. This involves considering the impact on all stakeholders, particularly investors. When faced with a conflict between short-term gains and long-term integrity, the ethical and legally compliant path should always be chosen. This requires open communication, honest reporting, and a commitment to transparency, even when the news is not favorable. Question 20. System analysis indicates a junior sales representative at Jinko Solar is being pressured by their sales manager to overstate the energy efficiency ratings of a new solar panel model to a potential corporate client to secure a large order before the end of the quarter. The sales manager suggests using optimistic projections that are not fully supported by independent testing data. The junior representative is aware that this exaggeration could lead to the client making a purchasing decision based on inaccurate information, potentially causing future dissatisfaction and contractual disputes. What is the most ethically and professionally responsible course of action for the junior sales representative? Option A. Politely but firmly refuse to misrepresent the product's specifications and explain to the sales manager that accurate information is crucial for building long-term client trust and adhering to ethical business practices. Option B. Proceed with the sale using the standard, verified product specifications, but do not mention the sales manager's request to anyone. Option C. Agree to the sales manager's request to use optimistic projections to meet the quarterly target, assuming the client will not scrutinize the data too closely. Option D. Immediately report the sales manager's request to the company's legal department without speaking to the sales manager first. The correct answer is A. Politely but firmly refuse to misrepresent the product's specifications and explain to the sales manager that accurate information is crucial for building long-term client trust and adhering to ethical business practices. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet sales targets can create a conflict of interest, potentially leading to decisions that prioritize short-term gains over responsible business practices. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation ethically and legally. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and accurate representation of product capabilities. This aligns with ethical principles of honesty and integrity, and also with regulatory frameworks that prohibit misleading advertising and require fair dealing with customers. By refusing to misrepresent the product, the employee upholds Jinko Solar's reputation and avoids potential legal repercussions. An incorrect approach of agreeing to the sales manager's request to exaggerate product performance would constitute a breach of ethical conduct and potentially violate consumer protection laws. This could lead to customer dissatisfaction, reputational damage, and legal penalties for Jinko Solar. Another incorrect approach of reporting the sales manager's request to a higher authority without first attempting to address it directly with the sales manager could be seen as an escalation that bypasses standard internal communication protocols. While reporting unethical behavior is important, a direct conversation first, if safe and appropriate, can sometimes resolve issues more efficiently and foster a culture of open communication. However, if the sales manager's request is clearly unethical or illegal, immediate escalation might be warranted. A third incorrect approach of ignoring the request and proceeding with the sale as usual, without addressing the sales manager's directive, could be interpreted as insubordination or a failure to follow company directives, even if those directives are unethical. This could lead to internal disciplinary action and does not proactively address the ethical lapse. The professional reasoning framework for such situations involves 1. Identifying the ethical and regulatory implications of the request. 2. Considering the potential consequences of complying or not complying. 3. Attempting to resolve the issue through direct, professional communication if appropriate and safe. 4. If direct communication is unsuccessful or the issue is severe, escalating the concern through appropriate internal channels, such as HR or a compliance department. 5. Documenting all interactions and decisions.